About it with our law enforcement experts. To you, Tom Fuentes, the weather tonight. It is supposed to thunderstorm. That really slowed down the search around the prison. What does that do to this?
Same thing. It slows down the officers that are out there, and I wouldn't expect them to be doing any search in the wooded area. I think the main concentration now will be to get that perimeter up and established and hope that they didn't get out of it. As John Anderson just mentioned, they've had a long time to have moved on since 1:30 this afternoon. So that'll be the priority, is to get that perimeter, get everybody set, and the planning that's going to go into the grid searches that they'll start doing in the morning probably.
Rick Schwein, to you, why is it so hard to catch these guys? I know it sounds like a simple question, but never before have escaped prisoners in the history of this prison and others been on the lam for like more than 2 days.
Well, that's a great question. These guys obviously are extremely clever, and they've had some luck. But see, that's what differentiates how this will end. They have to be lucky with every single decision that they make, every person that they trust, every decision about which way to go, what route to take. Law enforcement just has to have luck with them one time, and they'll be back behind bars. So I think ultimately this will have a good ending. Right now, as Tom said, the perimeter has to be maintained. They've got to go through their law enforcement planning steps in order to do a good grid search when they have light again in the morning, and hopefully they're still within that perimeter. They've also got to have contingency plans for any leads that come in, placing the two fugitives outside of the perimeter, and follow those up as quickly as possible.
Matthew, do you believe it is possible for the two of these men to have been on the lam for 2 weeks with no help on the outside? Because these aren't, men of the woods who have all these survival skills, etc., like we saw in the Eric Rudolph case, the Centennial Park bomber. That's not these guys. These guys have been incarcerated for a long time. They didn't have the ability to stash things away. Could they have done this without help from the outside?
Well, they could have, but if they did, it remains to be seen. But remember, they could have come across people who had no access or very limited access to social media or television that didn't know. They could have asked for favors. They could have found food in some of those cabins or homes. And I can't help but think, just like Rick said earlier, remember, if it rains tonight and the weather's bad and we're uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable. They had a 12-hour head start before anyone realized they were gone. We still don't know if the story that they gave the main suspect is a good story, a bad story, or otherwise. And the area where they're in right now is not inconsistent with an escape route. They're still on the Pennsylvania-New York border, and it might be plausible that they are, in fact, in that area.
If they are, Tom, why would they go south and not north into Canada?
I think they may have just had what they thought was a better opportunity for support from either other friends or families or people they made arrangements with in the United States without going into another country, because the Canadians are just as intense in their search abilities to try to look for them, and they would be just as cooperative with U.S. law enforcement.
A border.
Yeah, well, if they're walking through the woods, there's many ways to walk into Canada that won't, put them at a border checkpoint. But then once they're in the country, it's still going to be hard to make phone calls back to the U.S. to get the kind of support that they're eventually going to need. And again, it was possible that when they're spotted in the prison with phones, you can go to the grocery store and buy a phone that's not registered. Somebody could have done that for them. Even Joyce could have brought them phones that would not be registered to them. They could make phone calls that no one would be tracking. No one would have a clue who they called or where to look for the records of who they called. And so they could have had all kinds of arrangements in place before they ever left the prison.
Tom Fuentes, Matthew Horace, and Rick Schwein, thank you, gentlemen, very much. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with much more news in just a moment.
Attention, did you or anyone in your household work around asbestos-containing gaskets and packing? The Garlock bankruptcy may affect your rights even if you do not presently have an asbestos-related disease. Garlock's products were used in industrial and maritime settings where steam, hot liquid, or acid